Tonight, our biggest wake-up call yet. A woman in her 30s with no underlying health conditions dies of COVID as Sydney records 141 new cases. 5,500 reports to Crime Stoppers. Now the so-called freedom protesters face the music. And an update on police horse to Brook. Breaking news: a North Shore primary school shut down as a pupil tests positive. Australia's record-breaking gold, silver and bronze in a stunning day in the pool. Plus Shaun Johnson injured. Can the Sharks still mount a charge to the finals?
This is 9 News with Peter Overton.
Good evening. It's been a day dominated by charges, blame and condemnation of the so-called Freedom Rally, an event our Premier is warning could be a dangerous setback in our efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19. But as thousands took to the streets in the illegal protest, another movement was underway, a people's rally, record numbers turning out to be tested at clinics right across the city.
Thousands of people mask-free from all over Sydney, all ages, not just protesting. By the time the rally hit the heart of the city, some were eager to try and take on police.
Can I say how absolutely disgusted I was? It broke my heart. Millions and millions of people across our state are doing the right thing, and it just broke my heart that people had such a disregard for their fellow citizens.
The concern the so-called Freedom Rally will turn into a super spreader event, setting back efforts to stem the outbreak.
Each of those people who protested illegally, I'm sure, have loved ones. They're going to go home and risk passing that virus on to their most closest people to them.
She went further, urging employers or anyone who recognised a person in the rally to call Crime Stoppers. The protest didn't define Sydney, this did. 102,000 people spent their time getting tested. And illustrating just how infectious the Delta strain is, a gathering of 50 people at Pendle Hill to mourn a death has now thrown up 28 positive cases. The latest numbers, however, gave a faint ray of hope. 141 new cases, 38 while moving around the community. Both numbers down slightly on yesterday.
Most of the cases are in 5 LGAs. Fairfield with 34, Canterbury Bankstown with 30, Cumberland with 24, Blacktown with 19 and Liverpool with 12 cases.
There were 2 deaths. A woman in her 30s died in RPA. Another woman in her 70s died in Campbelltown Hospital.
I want to extend my heartfelt condolences to those families, their loved ones who are grieving today. But please note that younger people without pre-existing conditions can also fall victim to this cruel disease.
Exposure sites are growing in size. All of Halden Street, Lakemba, and the entire Campsie Centre in Amy Street, Campsie. Anyone who's been to the 2 locations is being told any symptoms get tested. And the rush to get vaccinated has created Pfizer scavengers. At the Homebush hub, people without a booking, desperate for the jab.
There's a lot of people not turning up, so they're doing cancellations between 8:30 and 8:45 each night.
They wait in the dark and cold at the end of the day for vaccine leftovers.
I'm going to be working with people from southwest Sydney, so I want to be as protected as I can be.
So you've got the commitment, you're here on a Saturday night in the cold trying to get it and pretty much got to beg for it, is that it?
Yeah, 4th night in a row here waiting.
Luck wasn't on his side. Nikolai will be back tonight for another chance in the Pfizer lottery.
Thank you.
Mark Burrows, 9 News.
The Premier has slammed those who attended yesterday's so-called freedom protest, saying they should be ashamed of their behaviour. Police have rounded up dozens from the illegal gathering, including the man responsible for allegedly swiping at a police horse.
Ugly scenes of chaos.
Hey! Hey! Hey!
In a very vocal rally that angered and enraged.
This is tyranny!
Today, the very same protesters didn't have so much to say. They stepped out of the Surrey Hills police station, one by one, released on bail, meek and mild, after a night behind bars. 22 so-called freedom activists today became the first of what police promise will be many to go before the courts.
Violent, filthy behaviour, risky behaviour that police will continue to investigate.
Nikola Dedovic drove from Wollongong to attend the rally. He ended up behind bars and on the front page. His own lawyer told the court he's the poster boy for the biggest idiot in Australia. 60-year-old freelance photographer Christopher Wilson is accused of shoving an officer in the chest.
Do you respect public health?
Do you respect us at the moment?
And there was this photo. It evoked public outrage, a police horse seemingly attacked by a protester. Video shows the man didn't punch the animal, but he was hit with an animal cruelty charge. Today, Christian Pukalnik represented himself. He didn't apply for bail and will stay behind bars for now. A second man, Ramon Corchese, also accused of animal cruelty against the same horse. He was arrested by police at his Adenza Park home last night.
Will you protest again?
No.
How come?
I don't need to. I think I've raised my voice enough.
Troop Horse Tobruk thankfully wasn't injured, pictured here home and happy in the safety of his stables. The mounted police units say they've been inundated with support.
What we saw was unprecedented violence, which is completely unacceptable and disgraceful. The fact that police officers and horses were targeted for violence yesterday is something that we won't take.
Among the 3,500 faces in the rally crowds, some were familiar. Former Souths and Bulldogs player Roy Azatasi and once teammate Ben Roberts shoulder to shoulder, plastering their involvement in the march online. Police already today catching up with anti-vaccination protester and wife of former NRL forward Frank Winterstein.
Can I have some evidence that you are actually a police officer and also why you're trespassing in my private property?
The couple's involvement earning them a surprise in the post.
You'll be receiving full infringement notices in the post.
That's fine.
This is Sally Ann John. Her conduct is now under investigation by New South Wales Ambulance. And there's the so-called TikTok man, John Bernard Carews. He says he predicted case numbers once or twice. He didn't predict police turning up with a $1,000 fine for attending the protest.
Over 200 people have so far been identified, and police are currently following those people up to take appropriate action.
5,500 people have already provided evidence to Crime Stoppers. With a strike force of detectives now in place, police are on a mission to catch each and every person involved.
It achieves no purpose. It will not end the lockdown sooner. It will only risk the lockdowns running further. And I think it offended many fellow Sydney-siders. People understand there are frustrations with lockdowns, but that type of behaviour doesn't help anybody. Selfish behaviour doesn't help anybody. And so in a city under lockdown, to engage in that was reckless and it was selfish.
A rally for freedom that might very well result in the exact opposite. Lauren Tomasi, 9 News.
We have breaking news now from the city's lower North Shore. Nine's Laura Tunstall is at Lane Cove West Public School. Laura, a positive case has been detected there.
Well, that's right, Pete. A student has tested positive to COVID. The school will be closed tomorrow for cleaning and also so contact tracing can get underway. All staff and students here at Lane Cove West Public School are being asked to self-isolate until they are contacted by New South Wales Health. Of course, schools across Greater Sydney are open for the children of essential workers. I understand, though, that the majority of teachers and students here at the school were teaching and learning from home. Now, of course, in a really strange coincidence, this same school actually recorded a positive COVID case a year ago, almost to the day, during last year's outbreak. So the school community is certainly well prepared and knows what to expect over the next couple of days. Pete?
Laura, thank you. Mark Burrows is with me in the studio. Mark, 141 cases today, 38 infections in the community. Still too high for an end to lockdown.
Indeed, Peter. Gladys Berejiklian says early next week she'll be able to say what life will look like after July the 31st, and it's a good bet it won't look too much different from going into August. The Premier says she wants to ease the restriction on some construction work. But as for children returning to school, maybe later next month for Year 12. But for the rest, more than likely Term 3 will stay on the kitchen table. Peter.
All right, Mark, thank you. Well, New South Wales will almost certainly have its lockdown extended, as Mark said. Other states are on track to open up. Queensland's Premier has also now returned from the Tokyo Olympics and straight into 2 weeks of quarantine.
A birthday homecoming, Anastasia Palaszczuk undergoing quarantine processing like every other foreign arrival.
Premier, did you have a good trip? We got the Olympics.
It's in the bag. Next stop, a quarantine hotel. On a day her state recorded 5 new COVID cases, all in hotel quarantine. But a Sydney infection could well give Queensland a new headache. A man who knew he was a close contact after a workplace exposure took Virgin Flight VA 1139 from Sydney to Ballina on July 14 before driving to Queensland. He tested negative 2 days before, although it later turned out to be a positive. But he was supposed to isolate for 14 days regardless and is believed to have infected a flight attendant who drove him to Queensland.
Of course, it was illegal for him to have left Sydney to go to Ballina, but the fact she went down to Ballina and picked him up, she was able to do at that stage. The border was not closed.
The man said he was isolating from July 10, but authorities in New South Wales and Queensland know that's not true.
I'm not actually sure where those 2 individuals have been while they've been in their infectious period.
The risk in Brisbane and the Gold Coast in particular remains very, very real.
Victoria recorded 11 new community cases, but that news is hardly bad.
100% of those cases were in isolation for 100% of their infectious period.
It means the lifting of restrictions there at midnight on Tuesday now looking more likely, as it does in South Australia, recording no new community cases today. Eddie Meyer, 9 News.
Scott Morrison has confirmed 90,000 extra Pfizer doses per week will be delivered to New South Wales from next week. The federal government has also secured 85 million more doses to be used over the next 2 years on Australians who have already had their first jab.
Beaming into Brisbane on the big screen, Scott Morrison with an assurance.
After a difficult start, the vaccine program is now making up lost ground.
And an admission.
We may not get every decision right.
He's now trying to right the wrongs in the delayed vaccine rollout, announcing an extra 85 million Pfizer doses have been secured.
It's another shot in the arm for Australians in the vaccination program.
60 million booster doses are due to arrive in 2022, with delivery beginning in the first quarter. Another 23 million are promised for 2023.
14 million Australians right now are in lockdown because Scott Morrison failed to secure enough vaccines for this year.
With 40 million Pfizer doses due this year, this brings Australia's total order to 125 million. But the bulk of this year's supply isn't expected to start arriving until October. There's more than enough AstraZeneca to go around.
Some 1.3 million AstraZeneca vaccines that are available. They're in the fridge, they're ready to go.
But many Australians aren't ready for them, after changing advice caused confusion and hesitancy.
I think there's a whole proportion of people who've heard mixed messaging about the AZ, which is a shame.
In February, AstraZeneca was approved in Australia for over 18s, but in April, after being linked to very rare blood clots, the Vaccine Advisory Group recommended it only for over 50s. 2 months later, that increased to over 60s. Before an indemnity scheme was announced and any adult could get it with their GP's permission. Yesterday, advice changed again for those in Sydney. The Vaccine Advisory Group now says anyone over 18 in Greater Sydney should strongly consider getting any jab, including AstraZeneca. With just 16% of the population now fully vaccinated, the Prime Minister acknowledges the vaccination rate isn't where it was meant to be by now. But he says daily and weekly rates are now hitting their marks. If Scott Morrison thinks he made mistakes with the rollout, he won't reveal them.
What matters is what we do now. That's what matters now. And we've been able to make up ground significantly over the last few months.
But the months ahead will also be crucial for the government, with Australians set to vote within the year. Fiona Willan, 9 News.
A much-needed boost to get vaccines in arms in our southwest. The mass vaccination hub in Glenquarry Town Centre at Macquarie Fields opens tomorrow in the old Coles site, with final preparations underway today. Appointments are available online now, with capacity for 20,000 jabs each week. Doors open at 8 a.m. New Zealand won't reopen the travel bubble with any part of Australia until the whole country has COVID under control. The Deputy Prime Minister says this doesn't mean zero cases, but being able to reliably predict where the cases will be through contact tracing. All right, the Australian spirit has triumphed at the Olympic Games in Tokyo. All our hopes starting to come true in the pool. Our swimmers bagging a full complement of medals, gold, silver and bronze. The golden highlight was the world record-breaking performance of our women's 4x100 metres relay team, spearheaded by Kate Campbell. The victory ranked as one of the great swims.